Davenport Community School District Board of Directors order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. T, would you please do a roll call?
Sure. Director Barnes,
Present.
Director Klein-Jerome, Director Gosa,
Present.
Director Hayes,
Present.
Director Postian,
Here.
Director Beck,
Here.
Director Potts is absent.
Thank you, Brenda. Director Klein-Jerome, would you please read the mission and vision statements?
Mission statement. The Davenport Community School District is dedicated to growing excellence in academics, the arts, and athletics for every child by ensuring the highest quality education in an environment shaped by our diverse community, preparing our students to be lifelong learners and productive citizens. Vision statement. Education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you, Director Klein-Jerome. Director Hayes, would you please read the guiding principles?
Yes, be happy to. Opportunity, we provide abundant opportunities to empower students to reach their full potential academically, creatively, and socially. Collaboration, we foster an environment that allows students, families, and community stakeholders to come together for the betterment of our students' education and future. Transparency, we share relevant and important information with our students, families, and the community to maintain open and productive communication.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Superintendent Schneckloff, would you please read the goals?
Goal 1, enhance student learning.
Thank you. There are no recognitions or presentations tonight. Are there any board reports? Director Klein-Jerome.
I went to the opening kickoff down at the Adler. Great speaker, good crowd. A few cell phones could have been put away. That was annoying, but other than that, it was really good. And Saturday, we went and watched Superintendent Schneckloff jump off the Black Hawk. It was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Are there any other board? Director Postian?
I also attended the same event and appreciate the message that the superintendent gave and also our guest speaker.
Thank you. I was at the Black Hawk kickoff. It took him like an hour to get down the side of the building, but that's all right. And then also I wanted to wish Director Hayes happy birthday for her birthday today. All right, we will move on if there's no other board reports. Communications, there are no open forums. There was no virtual open forums. All right. I don't have to read that tonight. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board accept the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Superintendent report.
None at this time.
Committee reports. Breaking Barriers Committee.
Nothing at this time.
Elziak.
We will meet in October.
All right. Policy Committee.
Not at this time.
Nothing for legislative advocacy or long-range facilities planning. Finance Committee. No committee reports at this time. All right. We'll move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on subject 9.01 K8 headphones?
Mr. President,
Sure thing, birthday girl.
I move the board approve and purchase the headphones for CDW-G in the total amount of $105,672 for the 24-25 school year.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 9.02, renewal of the Transition Alliance Program partnership with Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the contract with Iowa Vocational Rehabilitation Services for the Transition Alliance Program in the amount of $238,277.71.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Poston.
Just a question with the TAP program. Is that tied into IJAG in any way, and then also Project Search?
Project Search would be something different, and I do not believe there's a connection with IJAG. This is a different partnership to provide services for transition within the IEP.
And then how many students would be involved with that? Do you know?
Ooh, I can get you that answer.
Thank you. Is there any other
Thank you.
discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 9.03, professional development for Amplify CKLA? Director Poston.
Move the board approve the professional learning contract for Amplify CKLA for $131,400.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Beck.
Just because we haven't had a lot of discussion on this, can I get someone to kind of just for all of the contracts explain why we need to make such an investment in PD or training, how that works and how it'll help us?
Yes.
Absolutely. So the curriculum resources that we have adopted through the ESSER, that were supported through the ESSER, the resources themselves were paid for that, and then the professional learning is really important to go along with that. So that high quality professional learning will support the resources that are being delivered into the classrooms and into the hands of students.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 9.04, professional development for the Houghton Mifflin Harcourt intro into literature. Jesus, I struggled on that one.
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the professional learning contract for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt into literature for $286,650.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 9.05, professional development for Lexia Letters?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move the board approve the professional learning contract for Lexia Letters for $51,975.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 9.06, policies for board approval?
Mr. President,
Director Klein.
I move we approve the following policies: 200.04, 210.08, 401.06, 402.03, 501.03, 501.10, 501.12, 501.13, 502.06, 504.05, 603.12, 704.06, 706.01, 707.01, 707.02, 707.03, 707.04, 708, 710.01, 801.03, 803.02, and 905.03.
Wow, I'll take a drink after that. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Poston.
Under policies 905.03 and 502.06, did the committee take into consideration cell phones as other dangerous objects?
We did not.
Okay.
Director Beck.
There we go. So I just wanted some clarification on 905.03. And I know we're not on the next item, but it kind of relates to that for the school resource officers. Let's see. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So we have to vote to whether to employ a school resource officer for each attendance center for grades 9 through 12 because we have greater than 8,000 students in our district. Is that correct? All
That
right.
is correct.
Okay. And then does that include Mid-City?
Yes.
Okay.
It was listed on the policy, I think, as all 4 of the high schools.
Right. And then for the phrasing on 905.03, the last paragraph before the italics there, it says the district shall not authorize, back up, Brenda. There you go. The district shall not authorize staff members to carry firearms on school grounds in accordance with Iowa Code 724.6 unless approved by the superintendent. I just want to clarify that that language is we have the right to not allow anyone to carry firearms except under special circumstances. That's what we're saying there, and that we choose not to do that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's what we're saying. All right. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. May I have a motion on subject 9.07, approve employment of school resource officers?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the employment of school resource officers at each Davenport Community School District Attendance Center where students in grades 9 through 12 regularly attend classes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Director Beck.
One other question. We now have the Davenport Learning Center that has students. So do we now have a 5th officer? No. Okay. And we don't need, okay. So the only reason we're voting right now is because we're required to vote once a year. Is that right? Or is it just when the language changes? Because I know we
This
have
is
an
a
MOU.
formality due to the legislation changing.
Okay. Okay. Because we still have the same MOU with the city. And okay.
Yep, didn't change the MOU, didn't change any of that. It's just a formality to make sure that we're in compliance with the new legislation.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right. I just want to say I appreciate the fact that we do have school resource officers. They've been awesome. Sergeant Quick back there, my man, was helping direct traffic at Fillmore on Friday, getting people going the right way, because I don't know how hard it is when your kids have went to the same school for years and you don't know how to do the pickup and drop off. It blows my mind. But anyway, seeing no other discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. All right, we'll move on to discussion items. First topic of discussion is subject 10.01, new high school schedule for the 2025-26 school year. I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. As we've discussed as a part of our cadence, we're bringing this for a discussion tonight and then a vote at our next regular meeting. Dr. Barney and Diane Campbell have been leading the charge on this to review what does our high school schedule look like for us, and they've really been going on about a 1.5-year journey to investigate this, ensuring that we are cascading this information with an equity and voice in our district. And I couldn't be happier with the amount of information that you've gathered, the questions that are getting answered on a real-time basis to ensure that we are really going to do what's best for our students. With that being said, we are on a very tight timeline in order to make the adjustments that we have to do to be ready for next school year. We really do have to make this decision right now, and we wouldn't be able to make that decision without your hard work and legwork with the rest of the district. So first of all, I want to thank you for that work. And with that being said, I'll turn it over to Diane and Dr. Barney.
All right, thank you. So scheduling is an essential school infrastructure and support mechanism necessary for implementation of a multi-tiered system of support. A well-designed MTSS schedule ensures that schools can provide students sufficient time and access to rigorous core programming, as well as additional enrichment, interventions, and supports. Effective schedules can support multiple levels of intervention and enrichment based on student needs and afford staff adequate time for collaboration, analyzing data, and planning for instruction. Our purpose today is to provide an overview of where we are in the process in creating a strategic schedule. We are shifting from a technical task to centering on a strategic one. And making a schedule, a strategic one, is making a schedule that drives achievement, engagement, equity, and efficiencies. A technical schedule focuses just on making sure every student and teacher knows where to be each period. A strategic schedule, on the other hand, amplifies the district priorities, encourages best practices in teaching and learning. It heightens student engagement and ensures equity. So I just wanted to start off with that preview, an overview of that schedule and the work behind a schedule and the difference between a technical change and a strategic change. And what the team is really striving towards is that strategic approach. So why are we looking at a high school schedule? We'll start off with our North Star, which is the graduation rate, being at 72.7%, which is not where we want to be, not even close. Our data is also indicating that we need to do things differently. And then we need students to experience various opportunities and flexibility. And a schedule is just one way to attack these data points and these outcomes. But we know that the schedule has the potential to improve student achievement. It increases some flexibility in the schedule to respond to student needs. Year-long courses for algebra and ELA will allow for greater supports for students throughout the entire year. A schedule change provides a year-long options to decrease the gaps in learning. So being able to have that class for the full year and not wait for another year, for a year and a half sometimes, for example, in a math class. Double block high intensity courses for support is an option within a flexible and strategic schedule. And then, of course, attendance. The schedule is another way to approach some attendance things that we've had come up. As we started to outline this work, there are some assumptions that we went into it after gathering lots of input, that ELA and math courses are year-long. There are courses that will need additional time, and so how do we make those decisions? And we'll share a little bit about that process this evening. That there is more time spent on quality academic instruction that results in more student learning. And then relationships are key. That a schedule is, again, one piece to the puzzle, and we know that those relationships are absolutely critical. With all of this work, we want to highlight the growing excellence goals that we have, and these would be the goals that would have potential impact within a change of the schedule. Taking a look at emotional safety, impacting our proficiency and our advanced scores, being able to reduce ISS and OSS through relationships that we can have within a strategic schedule, chronic absenteeism, and then ensuring that 100% of the students in ninth grade earn that 6.5 credits to be on track for graduation. After reviewing the feedback that we received, it was very clear early on that there isn't one schedule that is going to be the answer. We've said it before and we'll continue to say it, that if there was, we'd be doing it, and so would every single high school across the entire country be doing that one schedule. What we did find is that through these essential key elements, that there are ways to create a schedule to make the impact that we're looking for. After reviewing the feedback again from the advisory team and the community forums, that there is a strong consensus around these key elements. However, there are different opinions about the best way to incorporate these schedule elements. Again, I'm just personally, through my experience, would say that it's interesting that we could be looking at one schedule, moving away from one, and there could be another district in the state that's actually moving towards it, because that's just, the needs are different. And it's fascinating to me, again, that there just isn't one schedule. So what we need to do is build the schedule based on these essential elements that will best meet the needs of students, including those year-long courses, having adequate time for instruction. We know that we need that acceleration enrichment opportunities for students, the interventions as well, being able to have planning time for teachers, keeping in mind the number of preps that teachers have. We want to keep that in mind. Teacher collaboration and limiting those transition time issues that might come up. So leadership is now working on integrating those elements to be able to create that enhanced schedule, which leads us to the enhanced block schedule. And this is just an overview of that timeline and the feedback loops that we've had with the advisory team, the community forums, student feedback. We had meetings in July to go through the feedback, to develop what a draft schedule might look like. We have taken it, the learning and results team has worked on the infrastructure behind the scenes, because there's a lot of work in prepping for this. And then on August 20th, it went out to the specialists, met with every department at the high school, and received feedback about the courses themselves. So the key assumption here also is that research has determined that no one type of schedule is best. Students benefit from equitable access to high expectations, and that strategic scheduling is the best when it's accomplished by a team. And that's why we've had multiple stakeholders involved in this, including students, to get their feedback. So through the advisory team, which began meeting over a year and a half ago, we even had a sub-team that met first semester a year ago. So it narrowed the schedule down to multiple schedules to look at. 4 of them: block, trimester, flex mod, and AB block. But again, after gathering that additional data and information, it led us to the essential elements. So the enhanced block defined, what does that mean? The enhanced block means taking our current block schedule and making it more flexible. So we will be adding options within the block to format to allow students more choice, and also teachers more choice, so that they have a say in what the courses, the time elements would be for courses. So this slide gives you an overview of what those enhancements are. This schedule that we're looking at would involve the opportunity for a block. It also has an opportunity for a skinny and a mini. So this slide provides an overview showing that a block is still every day for 90 minutes for 1 quarter, and that would be for 0.5 credit. We also have a skinny option, which is 0.5 credit for 45 minutes. I'm going to need some water, I think. Excuse me. And we also have a mini for 0.25 for a 45. Thank you. There were some questions that came up that will this allow students more choice within the schedule? And currently, a student can earn 4 within a block, within a semester. The schedule that we have outlined would be 3.5. With that said, it also includes the opportunity for study hall, and it also includes opportunity for a response to intervention time or enrichment time. So there are some opportunities for students to still earn that 4 credits within that semester if they are not, if that works best for them, to not need a study hall or not to take the enrichment or the intervention time. So then it would be equivalent. There are more choices through mini courses. For example, a mini, which is a 0.25 credit every day for 45 minutes, could be a course on ACT prep. And that ACT prep would be an elective credit as a 0.25 credit within that. And that would be an opportunity, again, as we develop more minis for students to take, more flexibility there.
I also want to add that those minis are also the opportunity to develop some introduction classes. So currently, we have a number of courses that kids aren't taking because they haven't been exposed to the material yet. So it gives a kind of an opportunity to launch or to encourage kids to take the bigger courses or the courses that lead towards a trade certification and those kind of things as well. So the minis open up that door to do more of that exploratory opportunity without having the semester long or course to go along with it.
That's a good example. We also have an example of more flexibility within the schedule. We currently offer and have offered an independent study credit that is a 0.5 and is around the time constraints for that. But with this schedule, you could do a 0.25 credit. It could be a mini or it could be a skinny, depending on what the student needs within that independent study. So just one more example about that flexibility within the schedule. Another example is Advanced Placement Lab. Advanced placement courses would be offered for the full year, but there is an opportunity to have a mini, which again is 45 minutes for 1 quarter, that would allow the student, if that was worked in their schedule and that's what they needed, to take an advanced placement lab to prepare for the test. So those are just some examples of some enhancements, but using that block, that skinny, and the mini option is the flexibility that is increased within that schedule. Anytime you're looking at a schedule change, we do have to review graduation requirements because it can potentially impact graduation. So this slide really is a draft. First of all, we can't emphasize enough that this was just the first blush at looking at what graduation requirements would change. So you can see if we work actually from the right to the left, the class of 25, which is the current class, would maintain 26 credits. The class of 2026 would move from 26 to 25 credits. The class of 27 would move to 24. The class of 28 would move to 23, and the class of 29 would move to 22 credits. Again, this is just an initial blush at this, a very draft form. We're still gathering feedback and reviewing implications around credits. We would like to take the opportunity about this too, because there have been questions about electives and wait, we're decreasing? Is that changing the rigor? It is not changing the rigor. This actually puts us in alignment with what the state requires for graduation. We require more electives than the state requires. It puts us in alignment with the districts in the metro area so that we're not requiring more on that elective side. Now, with that said, are students still motivated to take credits? We would say yes. We have evidence now that students, even though they meet the graduation requirement, will continue to take credits, will continue to take courses. So that's just something to keep on the radar too. And then questions have come up about the elective because that's where the reduction occurs within those credits. And we currently, because we do offer more than the state requires, we also really want to come back to the idea about student voice and what electives are we offering that are meeting the student needs and the student interest. And so how do we get those courses where students are really wanting to take those electives because that's in their interest area. Next, from a student perspective, freshmen to junior students will need to take a full schedule, and that does include a response to intervention or a study hall. And then seniors can take a condensed schedule, but must be considered at least half time to participate in athletics and activities. So the schedule would show that it's a 43 to 45 minutes. I mean, we're still working through some of the time pieces on that, but for each period, it would be 43, 44, 45 minutes with those opportunities. It does decrease the amount of time in transition, so from moving from one class to the next, but it is very unlikely that a student would have skinnies all day, for example, so that they had multiple transitions. It's probably a combination of a block schedule, they might have a skinny, and they might have a couple minis, that type of thing. So it doesn't really increase the transition time for each student because most of them probably would not have an entire schedule built on skinnies. There have been questions from a student perspective about AP courses and what they would be delivered. So this would be one, again, that all the specialists have met with teachers, have received feedback, and still in the process of gathering and landing on, the final decisions. But for AP, looking more at a full year as a skinny course throughout the entire year.
With the availability, as Diane discussed earlier, of being able to get that additional support towards testing time towards the end of the year.
We also wanted to make sure what would this look like for our students who are in music and orchestra and band and all of these things. If the courses are offered across, again, as a skinny for the whole year, then they would have opportunities to be in those multiple fine arts courses. I did ask the specialists today how their meetings went. I had a general idea just through some other conversations, but they were very grateful for the teachers, the input, the questions that they had, even the request of, I just need a little more process time and then come back. So they joined another Google Meet later to be able to really, again, identify the classes in each of the departments of a block, a skinny, or a mini. The teacher schedule. Now that we've looked at the student schedule, teachers would teach 6 out of 8 periods, which is in line with our current expectations. They would have a duty for a 7th period, and the duty, these again are just examples. We worked with our high school administrators and asked how they currently use teachers for their duties, and this was a list. So again, in very draft form, but the direction would be that these would be ideas of those duties that could be used within that schedule. Okay. This next one does outline a bell schedule, and it has in capital letters. It's concept only, so when we say it 8:30 to 9:16, again, this gives just a framework of what this would look like. Also shows the passing time within that. Lunch would be over 2 periods potentially. kind of gives just, at the length of the course right now. So mathematically, this schedule works. So we're continuing to work on this. There have been questions about schedules, cross-campus courses. So if I'm at West and I want to go to Central to a course. So we did have some early discussion starting on how to ensure courses are offered at the beginning or the end of the day or during lunch, so that there is travel time that students can do that. We also know that response to intervention time or that study hall time can also be used as a transportation time. So if a student needs to transport or travel to another building or for another course, they could. Some courses are blocked, and the skinnies would be, again, an opportunity for students to be able to use that travel time. And then we would also look at the possibility of ways that we could offer certain courses across the district at the same time, so that if students needed to move from one to another, that possibility is built in. So being proactive within the schedule to increase the flexibility. Just want to bring us back to those key essential elements that we started off with as we've gathered information from all stakeholders. And for example, one of the first key essential elements is that ELA and math courses are year-long, and this rigorous schedule would occur to support that student learning. The next is adequate time for instruction to work. So again, rigorous schedule so that we can make sure that there is adequate time for instruction, intervention, remediation, acceleration, enrichment. High expectations can happen throughout the entire schedule. And we also have that response. And the response to intervention, just a change in this. In the current schedule, it's a drop everything and it happens in this particular time. In a flexible schedule, in the enhanced block schedule, what we would be looking at is that it's offered every period throughout the entire day. So again, more flexibility for students to move in and out if they need it for one quarter and they don't need it for the next quarter. That works. If they're going to an enrichment and they need enrichment experience in one particular area, they can take that for a term as opposed to a whole year placed in a course. So student choice in courses means that periods allow students to select more courses. The credits do decrease over time, but it doesn't limit the opportunities. You know, as students become juniors and seniors, again, more open schedules. And there's that flexibility to offer those AP test prep scores, those mini classes that we talked about. There was a need, a request around consistency, that a student's schedule remains predictable. And that was really important to many of the stakeholders. So this schedule would allow for predictability. There is planning for teachers that would be in line with current expectations, and continuing to look at the number of preps that teachers would have, and collaboration time. So just a couple things to wrap up today. We started, again, taking a look at updating the graduation requirements and determining the roll-up for students, which is occurring early discussions about that, so we know what that might look like. Then in September, we're updating the course guide. In September, we also have the campus programming. Updating the new and the archived courses is going to be important, and that's a heavy lift, but there is a way to make that happen, and we think in a very strategic way that would be efficient for any kind of campus roll-up to occur. We have board approval of the course guide, which happens in October, and that's over 2 meetings. And once that happens, students then can start registering for courses in campus, and then we would complete that registration course in February, creating the master schedule after that, ready for the 25-26 school year. That just summarizes the timeline and gives you an overview of where we are in the process with the high school schedule.
Director Hayes.
Thank you. A quick question for either one of you. hypothetically, for the enhancements, if there was problems with scheduling for teachers or shortage, inability to do all of those, is there any chance that the block, skinny, and minis could all be in one class, or they're all separate sessions? Would there ever be a circumstances where I have this 90-minute class, but I may want to jump in for 45 minutes and have different cohorts in the same class?
That is a great question. Is there potential for that? There would be. And I would almost look at this as phase one and phase two and phase three. For the 25-26 school year, that has not been discussed specifically. Is there potential for it? There is possibility. Another question related to that is if a course is offered year long, is there also an opportunity to offer it as a block? There's potential for that too, but from a master scheduling standpoint, there would be we'd have to really work on that. And so is that really in year one that we would want to try something like that in our schedule? Not sure we're there yet. But again, shows the flexibility that a schedule like this could occur.
Director Barnes.
A question on the credit reduction and what that looks like. I know that you said that our current credit requirement is beyond what the state expects. That's fine. But I am curious about benchmarked districts that we'd like to be like, and whether that credit reduction is similar to those, and if you might provide some examples of districts that you've benchmarked against with that credit reduction.
Absolutely. We have looked at other districts, UEN as well as Metro, and this would be in more alignment of other districts. But I certainly can get that and work with our superintendent to get the specifics on that.
My other question is related to the slide on teacher schedule and the variety of duties. Am I to interpret that all of these duties are being accomplished now, or are we going to have teachers who are going to be expected to take on a new duty as part of this? That's a question. And I think embedded in that is with the flexibility or the promised sort of expansion of potential courses and content. Is this cost neutral, or is there savings? Maybe I missed that chapter.
So on the first portion of it, in regards to those various duties, not all of the duties is a current teacher. Are all teachers doing that particular duty? If you look at the list of them, credit recovery courses and supervision, there's some teachers doing that and others who are not doing that. Hallway supervision during a window of time. Some teachers are currently doing that, others are not. Chemical management, depending on what department you're in, some are doing it, some are not. So these are the options that are available during that window of time. And so there may be a teacher who is currently not supporting credit recovery, but based on the courses they're teaching and the availability in their day, they will now have that opportunity to support the building in that way, if that makes sense. The second question on cost neutral, within the current structure, teachers are currently teaching 3 of 4 periods. In this structure, they're now going to teach an 8-period day, some of them blocks, some of them not. They're going to teach 6 of an 8-period day. So at minimum, at a starting point, we're cost neutral. As we begin to explore into how they support that 7th period and those kind of things, there could be some benefits that are beyond the cost neutral, but that's yet still to be determined. Part of which, because one of the ideas that we're also floating out there is during that 7th period, I might cover a study hall Monday, Tuesday, and then I might be able to go and collaboratively work with another group of teachers on Thursday and Friday. And so me and another teacher might split that study hall together. So I cover it part of the week, they cover it part of the week, so that we can also have collaborative time that does not impact my personal planning time as well. So that's why I said we're still working through the magic associated with that.
Thank you.
Dr. Barney, could I add just one
Please.
comment to that? Director Barnes, you asked from that bulleted list, are they all kind of being accomplished right now? And I would agree with everything Dr. Barney said. I would point out that some of these on this bulleted list are I don't want to call them duties, but would be created by the enhanced schedule, such as the enrichment periods, the RTI periods. We don't necessarily have the same structure right now. So some of these are potential duties and not things that are already in existence.
I appreciate that, and that we had envisioned that some of these things would be happening within the current schedule, and we're not able to perform some of these things within the current schedule. So thank you very much.
Director Klein Jerome.
The minis, you said it opens up opportunities to explore. Would that mean we'd need to create a curriculum for something we currently don't have? And will that cost? And second, then, would we also need to add teachers to teach something that we currently don't have?
On the teaching standpoint, there's no intention to change any certifications or anything like that. Are there some minis that would be proposed? And that goes through a new course proposal process, which right now we're looking at September 1st. If there's even any consideration for a course that needs to happen. And then, the board meets, and if this is approved, then we would start work right after that. We'd have, this year and the next summer, if there were some courses. The one that I'm going to share is ACT Prep. Do we have curriculum right now? We don't, but could we access? There's lots of different resources and ways that we could do that, develop it between now and next school year. Would I anticipate hundreds of new No. Are there going to be some new proposed minis? Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay. In the slide, it says students can include intervention remediation. Can. I'm failing math. I don't have it's not I have to take remediation, or this makes it sound like they get a choice. Do they have a choice?
I think that the answer is going to be yes and no. I think when we discover, we have to determine. So a previous district that I worked with, for example, we took all incoming 9th graders and we reviewed their previous histories, test scores for proficiency in math and proficiency in literacy. If we determined, because we had multiple periods, see the structure that we're currently under with only 4 windows, if I determined that a kid needed math support, they're in math for two hours of their day. And if I gave them math support, they would also be in another 2 hours a day. And that only leaves 2 other windows in which they can get anything else. And we know they also need literacy, a number of things, right? And so in a multiple period day, what we were able to do is to say, hey, as you come in, we realize there's a lot of things that you would like to explore, but it would be malfeasance for us to continue to move you forward, not being able to read and not being able to do math at a level that is sufficient. And so we would then, within that kid's schedule, add that math support in, and because it's only 1 hour or 45 minutes or 46 minutes, we were able to support the 46 minutes of algebra, standard everybody's taking, and we went back through and filled in gaps that were along the way left over from kindergarten through wherever. And so that was a support. What that did mean, though, is we had to make that determination that was so important that we had to say to them, hey, this quarter or this semester, you're not going to be able to take all the other things that you wanted to take. We get you where you need to be. You'll have plenty of room your sophomore, junior, and senior year to grab those things that were there. And so we made that determination because they were non-proficient. Here was the interesting thing that happened. I would have kids, even though we told them, in the beginning. We told them during 8th grade year, hey, make sure you do well on your, at that time's ITBS, so that, because if you can't read or you can't do math, we're going to give you the support that you require next year in high school. Kids didn't necessarily believe us right away. When they then got the letter during the summer and then got their schedule and had it on there, I would have kids come, Doc, I can do it. I tell you, I can read. I know I can read. And guess what? They were proficient when we reassessed them because they didn't have the motivation during 8th grade to show us what they needed to. And we would have kids that we would adjust their schedule in those first couple weeks of school based on now showing us they were proficient in math and they were proficient. And every year after that, they showed us as well because they understood what the support was that they were going to be given, that we were mandated to have to give them, right? So I think that's kind of a part of it. But then when we start looking at, we have a special case scenario where a kid took Algebra 1 and geometry in 7th and 8th grade, and now they're on a different track come 9th grade. We have to be able to provide flexibility to also look at that schedule to say, okay, they're doing an AP class and whatever else, that AP support or enrichment that they're going to receive based on their schedule might look a little bit different. But our standard across the board, what everybody has built into their schedule as a starting point is the RTI period, and then we can work from there based on what the circumstances is of that student based on their needs on either end of the spectrum. Does that make sense? That's why I said it's a yes and no.
Yep.
But it creates the flexibility to be able to do that versus you've only got 4 periods that we can work with, and our support is difficult.
Okay, so, and I'm coming to this from an English teacher's point of view because that's what I taught in high school. I had 3 classes, 9th grade English. That meant I had probably 90 kids within a term, a semester. Okay, now they all, because of your pacing guides, everybody did a research paper at the same time, and I went home with 90 research papers. Now you're going to make me teach 6 of these classes. Now I'm going home with 180 research papers, and I'm going to grade 180 finals all at once in a very short day and a half. That's going to be impossible. So how are you going to adjust that so teachers aren't overloaded with that finals and those research papers and those big items that take, I'd get up at 4 in the morning and start, you know, there's just no way to get it in during the school day.
Yeah, I would push back on that it's not possible because every other district that's on a traditional schedule does exactly what you described. So I think it's possible. It will be different, and we'll have to explore what that looks like to support them. What are our grading timelines? Where are the points that these things happen? How do we support those projects and starting earlier and the windows that you support along the way so it's not all at one chunk? But when I even as close as Pleasant Valley, for example, is on a schedule very similar to this. And so that same dialogue that you just said would have to be represented there. And it is different than what we're currently doing. So there is going to be a curve on how we do it. And that's the next question. How do we support those folks in going through that process? And I know there's been conversations on the curriculum side.
And maybe your pacing guides are not so that everybody does the same thing at the same time because that's just an overload.
Yeah. I would hope that we would not also give a teacher 6 periods of a high intensity, same exact course all the way through, that they could have some that would flow along the way.
But ninth grade,
Okay. Yep.
9th grade English is 9th grade English. And then if you give me a writing course, I still have all that. So,
Yep.
you know, no matter how you slice the pie and I can only speak for English, you're going to have a lot of writing to read and, you know, no matter what you're teaching. Yep. So, let's see. I had one more. Your comment was, we want to make sure it does not impact personal planning time. That's awesome. And I'm going to jump to something. Then let's not forget the elementary people, because you do not regard their personal planning time the same. If we need to sub, oh, sorry, you don't get a prep today. If we have to have your meetings, whatever, CTT meetings, we're going to take your prep time. So I want equity. That's an important thing. So all well and good here, and I'm happy that they are being protected, but then we need to be fair across the board. That's it.
I will assure you, you have folks who are married to elementary folks in the room. You have folks who have been elementary folks in the room. It is a conversation that we continue to explore. And it will be one that when I go home and my wife hears what we were talking about today, we will have that conversation as well. And it's on the dialogues that we continue to have. We made some adjustments last year with middle school to do that. Now we're making some adjustments with the high school. And I can tell you that our superintendent, when we begin to, I'm not going to say all the things that we talk about on her, but that planning time is a part of the conversations we have at cabinet as well.
Before I ask anybody else, I do want to remind you all, we were talking about the high school schedule, and someone's getting a little sideways here bringing in elementary, so I'm not trying to get in trouble. They're recording us right now. Director Beck.
Yeah, I need some time to process. I've had a few days, but still a lot of questions. I guess most of them boil down to the fact that I am concerned about the timeline. Why not I hear a lot of, we don't know that yet. And it wouldn't be as concerning if we weren't trying to make this course guide ready in, say, October. If we were making it ready in February or March or something. I guess I feel like there's a lot of questions still that need to be answered before we make this drastic a change. So, for example, I know for some advanced placement courses, particularly if they're lab science, lab has to be 25% of the curriculum. And there are lots of ways to do that, but there's no way to do that that doesn't require a 2-hour block, 90-minute if it's block schedule. I have never had a college level lab science course where the lab wasn't 2 hours long or double class periods, right? And so trying to offer something as a skinny all year, that's fantastic. I do appreciate that. 1 class a day. But if you're trying to do a lab, offering that, say, Tuesday and Thursday of that skinny, that's 2 hours, but they aren't all conducive to being done in 2 separate hours rather than 2 consecutive hours. Does that make sense? And I don't know how the lab classes run now, so maybe it's already been worked out and we have the ability to do that. But that's something that I would think about in terms of, you said already a lot of the CTE courses would run double block. To me, that makes sense, right? So that would be 2 90-minute courses. Is that correct? If that's what double block is that what that means? So for like student built home and stuff like that?
No, it would be 2 periods. That would be the 2 46-minute periods back to back.
Okay,
And
so
that's what double,
okay,
that's
got
what
it.
blocked means, yes. Yeah.
Okay, so it would be the block.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, that would make more sense for some of those classes that have those types of intensive things, but not just CTE courses. I can think of lots of other courses
Correct.
that would need that time commitment,
Correct.
maybe all year, but depends on the course, I guess. I don't know how they're run right now. Go ahead.
And that's what the departments are deciding and giving input on right now. So if it is an intense science course and it needs that block time because it is,
Set up,
that's what
tear
it
down.
requires,
Okay.
then they're getting input from teachers,
Okay.
from department heads, that would be recommended as a block.
Okay.
So it's beyond CTE
okay.
courses, any course.
And I would
Could be
like to
considered.
follow up on your first question. And so one of the things that we hear loud and clear from the board, from our community, is that we don't want it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
We don't want it to perceive that we already know what we're going to do. You haven't even voted on this yet.
Right.
So a lot of the things that you hear them say, well, we don't know that yet. Can you imagine if we rabbit holed and did all that stuff? What we would be accused of is, well, you already know what you're going to do. So the answers, you're like, well, we're not certain what that looks like. The second we get the green light, it's go time.
Okay.
We have people in this district that are outstanding schedulers, our counselors. Is it a tight timeline? Oh, yes, it is. We believe the reason why we're putting this forward is we can't wait that'll be 2 years. And we believe that it's valuable enough to dedicate the resources to get it done this year, because we believe that fast timeline is going to help us increase our students getting to and through that graduation bar with some type of a certificate or on their way to college.
Okay.
And so when you hear us say, well, we don't have the answer to that yet, because we have to stop and allow our board to help us make this decision. And then from there, we have those dynamic people that are going to lock themselves in a room and make this their work on that cadence that was described behind. So that's kind of what you're feeling like. We're not certain. We're not certain.
Mhm.
We know if you ask these human beings, we know the direction we're going to go if the board says yes with this.
Okay.
And so it's not while there are uncertainties and we need to work them out, we're going to get the right people in the room and begin that work immediately if this is voted on to move forward.
Okay. Well, and I didn't mean to imply that we don't have those people, and I totally get the idea of not digging down into every bit of the weeds, because that's not necessarily a valuable use of time if the board says, no, we're just going to leave things the way they are. I totally get that. I guess I want to be comfortable with a sense that, say, you guys pulled 10 random, very disparate students from different high schools, or 10 from each high school, looked at what their schedule looks like now, and tried to fit that into an enhanced block. Would it work? To me, that would give me the comfort level of, I'm taking this kid who goes to North and is taking all these welding courses, and I'm taking this other kid who goes to West and is doing a lot of orchestra and fine arts, and I'm taking this other kid who's doing all these computer science, and this other kid who's going to college, and this is what their schedules would look like if we actually made this change. Because then you're going to find those little things that might fall through the holes, right?
Mhm.
Because, okay, this course wouldn't work on that timeline. To me, that sort of is, I'm not asking you to do all the work, but, pull some random samples and see how that would shake out, I guess, would be kind of help me
So we actually,
feel a little better.
when we initially began the process and was looking at a time of day, John Flynn did a phenomenal job of saying, okay, in a 5-period day, here's what a kid's schedule would look like. In a 6-period day, here's what a kid's schedule would look like. Here in a 7-period day, here's what a music kid's schedule would look like.
Okay.
And so our next piece is exactly that, of taking all the different specialized programs that we have as a starting point and saying, all right, what would this look like if a kid wanted to do band, orchestra, and choir? Now, what else is left in their day after that? So that is a part of the work,
Okay.
to be able to do that. What I can assure you, though, outside of that, part of the last time we were together, it was kind of like, all right, you're going to create this thing. How will we know it will work? Well, as we began to twiddle and work on it and come together as a group, we discovered that we weren't reinventing the wheel. There was other folks that were doing a similar schedule,
Okay.
and that we were able to look at, okay, what does a block with some skinnies look like? Now, the beauty is we're planning to go deeper into exploring the impact of the skinnies with the minis and those other things. That's a little bit different, but it's still the same 8-hour a day that so-and-so also has in place, and to be able to make that work. And what does it look like when you provide the RTI during the day instead of fixed day? And so those kind of things. And so I think we will be able to do exactly that.
Okay.
And what I would also say is, similar to the question earlier of, well, a teacher can't do that. AP is being offered in 45-minute increments across the country as well. Now, your second portion of it, I love that you amended to that next level of thinking on it, which was, what is the best way to be able to do that? And that's why we're not limiting it just to, it's going to be 45 minutes across. What is this class? What does this content demand in order for setup, tear down? And also, how do we also make sure we're supporting that kid at the end of the year? Because if they've already knocked out that whole AP course during the first half of the year, but they're not taking that test until the end of the year,
Right.
we won't do that student justice either. So what does
Right.
that look like to be able to provide that support?
Well, and
So,
that was one of my main concerns with AP courses is that we have a situation now where students can take these courses, but then not take the exam because the exams are always in early to mid-May. And so, we don't want that gap. And same with I like the idea of the ACT prep opportunity.
At
So
the right time of the year based on where it's being
Yeah.
offered for that
yeah.
junior class.
So the RTI time, that's my other question. Is that something that students have to have?
So that's the question I was trying to answer earlier, where I
Yeah.
said, as a starting point for the average kid, based on across the board and what works best, the intervention time is appropriate to give them some enrichment or to get them some
Okay.
remediation. And that was something that popped up overwhelmingly throughout the student surveys as well. Of, I want time to be able to get my instruction and get my schoolwork done.
Okay.
Our kids, in all honesty, don't want to they don't want homework,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That is a problem in a number of ways. It's a good thing to have that I can get it all done at school, but it's also not necessarily preparation for everything after high school,
Right.
as well, regardless of what we're looking
Right.
at. So we have to be able to provide them. We want to be able to provide them a structure by which they can have support if they need it, and they can work independently to also get done what they need to get, which is a good skill to be able to have. And so,
Right.
as a base point, that's our starting point. But if you're a student that you've got something else going on that requires we need to take you to a different place and support you through some enrichment or access to some higher level courses, that's a different dialogue. If you're a student that really needs not independently driven support time and it needs to be controlled by somebody else, then we also have that available. And so
Okay.
that's my yes no answer of, as a starting point, that's our
Okay.
starting point for everybody. And then we adjust.
Well, when that time period is explained like that, it makes a lot more sense as to why everyone.
Not just a time where I'm just sitting around kicking
Yeah.
it, not
Yeah. It's not like
Yep.
your old-fashioned study hall.
And it provides us some opportunities for seniors to do something a little bit different
Yeah.
for our juniors and seniors in regards to release time, which
Right.
serves as an incentive to get done what I need to get done. So
Right.
all those other things.
Right. So my last question, I guess I do have some concerns about the reduced credits, and I know you've addressed that already. But anytime we're reducing the number of credits, I get concerned. And I understand we require more than a lot of the other schools. But quality is also important. It's not quantity, it's quality. And so if the 22 credits that students are going to end up getting are higher quality credits, then, so be it. So I guess I just want to voice that's my other concern. And I'm assuming we're going to have another chance to sort of talk about this before we have to make a decision. Is that right? Or
Our cadence for this is that in order to accomplish the tight timeline, we're going to request that the board vote at this on September 9th.
September 9th? Okay.
So we would ask if there's, I hope I'm not overstepping my grounds, but if there are additional questions for us to get answered and get to the board, to all board members, that we will continue to do that as those questions come up. The example being, what is the comparison of credits across the area and across the state? How do we look compared to name said school district?
Yeah.
What do their credits look like? So that's what we would get. That would hopefully answer that question and put you in a position to respond accordingly. So
Okay. Yeah, I think, if it's possible to keep the board members kind of in the loop so we can have time to process some of those things before we come up for it, that'd be great. I'm sure I'm going to think of like 5 questions after I leave here tonight. I had already thought of 5 before I got here, but anyway, thank you very much. I have to say, I love the fact that we've got our core math and ELA all year in this. That to me is a really important step in the right direction. In terms of scheduling, maybe it would be beneficial to put them all sort of either first or fourth, or something like that. So it's consistent throughout the day from school to school, that everybody's either in this course or that course, to help with that scheduling. I don't know. Just a thought.
Absolutely. You know, a critical piece to this too is the scheduling, and the counselor plays such an important role. And we know that there's other ways to distribute that work too. So we will work closely with counselors to make sure that they have the supports, the time that they need to process any kind of changes that we make as well.
Can you hang on because like two other people want to go and thank you, Director Poston.
First of all, I want to thank your group for taking on this task. This is obviously not very easy to do, and so I appreciate all the hard work you put into it. I was wondering, kind of a follow up to Director Beck's comments as far as, can you give us some scenarios of examples like student A that's following a CTE pathway, and then plug in some different options like, okay, the student is struggling in math. Okay, so how are you going to plug that in as far as a mini or a skinny? And the same way, say a student that's taking a college prep pathway. Just give us some examples. And to me, for myself, I could visualize that a little bit better as far as, okay, this is how it's going to work for this student. This is how it's going to work for this student, okay? And throw in some scenarios that where they're not proficient in, and then that we could just actually see what's going on. The other thing, I do have a problem with reducing the number of credits. And I understand where you're coming from as far as, comparing that to other school districts. But just remember, this school district is trying to grow excellence, okay? So just because other school districts have reduced credit requirements, that's not necessarily a reason for us to, follow that. I look at what we are spending on facilities and what we are spending on curriculum, and then we're going to come along and cut back on credits. Now, to me, that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to have a hard time adopting that.
There were some questions that came up, and again, more discussion, but there are districts across the country that offer a core, a standard, and an honors diploma. And so then at each level, that gives, depending on the student's goals for post-secondary work, gives them different options. So that is another way to look at that.
Another thing that bothers me is, okay, so you've got the requirements through their junior year. But then come senior year, I mean, some of these seniors might be in school for an hour or two, and that's it. And to me, that is a waste of time. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars. And so I'm putting my taxpayer hat on now, and I'm thinking this student's only going to be there for maybe half to less than half a day. And why aren't these students picking up some electives? And it's free. It's
Right.
free. Why aren't they picking these electives up and going to school for a full day?
We have some really exciting opportunities to explore that again, back to student voice. So, for example, there is a new course called a capstone course, and that capstone really goes more to authentic learning and has a lot of individual authenticity that students can engage in. And so, creating a course like that would allow a senior to say, okay, I've met my requirements, but I really want to take this because this is a project I want to finish, and it's going to be an incredible asset to my resume if I'm going on to employment. It's going to be an incredible piece to post-secondary if I decide I'm going on to college. It would be a great piece. Many college applications are now requiring, or not requiring, but looking at things outside of what we have traditionally looked at. For example, ACT or our test, any of our testing. But they're looking at community service and projects that students have engaged in. So it's those type of experiences. I also think about internships and how can we ensure that students are in line, and knowing that that's an opportunity for them as well. So I think it's really creating that menu as they have reached their credit requirements, that now the door is open to all of these other opportunities that will lead you and support you as you transition into post-secondary.
So, Director, I want to applaud you because there was a part of me that thought you were in one of our meetings. We had a teacher raise that exact thing in two folds. She first raised the conversation of, hey, we've got a number of kids that during their junior and senior year aren't taking very many classes. And I think many of us around the table with our own children encourage them to take college classes on the district's dime. We did a number of things to say, you're going to take advantage of every opportunity that you have. And we know that those kids are only in that position because that means that they knocked it out 7th grade, 8th grade with taking high school classes, took a lot of classes as their freshman year and their sophomore year, and that built up the ability to have that flexibility, and they passed all their classes. So a number of good things have happened if that kid's gotten to that point. And that same teacher on the flip side of it that said, you know, hey, when we're looking at, do we really need to keep this high number of courses that they can take, said, but we also are in a position that because we're stuck having to take care of a whole lot of remedial things and a whole lot of other things on the front side, the kids never get to what they called, I think her phrase was, high interest classes. And so that's also a part of that issue is what can we do to offer classes that kids say, I can't wait till my junior or senior year so I can get to that class. So that's the other thing that is a part of this task that we have to fulfill is how do we develop and offer classes that kids can't wait to get to instead of can't wait to be done with so that they only have. When I was walking through the north today, for example, I heard a kid say, I only have one class left to graduate. And they were like, you only have one class left? You're like, so you're only going to come to school for one day? And he was like, no, I'm involved in this sport, so I've got to at least do this amount. And I still want to take this semester or this quarter and this. So he had some things that were keeping him around, and he's the kid that you were describing. And we've got a lot of kids. I've heard my counselors say to me, hey, but a lot of these kids are trying to get done so they can go work. That's a tough competition, right? And so we got to make sure we're offering courses that allows that kid to have some delayed gratification around the financial side of things. And we're not talking about the kid that has to, we're talking about the kid that's choosing that over what we're trying to offer. And that's key. And it has less to do with what number of credits we're requiring and more to do with how do we entice and keep the kids excited about being in school and continuing with us or going to the college or going wherever it may be as a part of that.
Dr. Barney, if I could add to that too. One of the things that excites me about the flexibility within the enhanced block, those minis are things that are exposing our students to the pathway. So providing that glimpse might just be that spark that gets somebody to say, yeah, I want to Dr. Barney's point. So I think that's an exciting concept that's kind of come alive in this process.
Just to follow up to your comments, Dr. Barney. So, you know, when we're talking about reducing the credits, okay, so, and I'm not sure how this would work, but we've got to get our students more community minded and more involved in our communities. And so, you know, as a requirement for graduation, you know, if we're going to reduce credits, well, then let's make requirements for doing something, you know, community project or whatever. So that might be something to think about as you're organizing this whole schedule.
I think not to get side trailed, but I think there are a number of people in the room that would support a senior project or a what we call project-based focus. High Tech High, I know the district visited several years ago in San Diego. One of the things that they say is you start with this thing that you experience in 7th and 8th grade that's directed towards impacting. Every year you have every grade level has a task to somehow connect to making the community a better place, whether it's building bird houses for birds that take care of natural pests and insects in the community or whatever it is in one grade level. But each year you have that and it builds to this big thing. And so one of the projects would be, for example, that you host a gala at the Playhouse as a part of your project, that then the donations and proceeds go to some kind of charity within the community. I think there are folks that would love that. I think colleges are appreciate it. And that's what I believe Diane was talking about when she was talking about that capstone experience, a project. So that would be us potentially recommending it, but ultimately with the board saying, and this kind of fits into the next agenda item, I do believe, as well. So I'm going to pause there as my brain was processing out loud as well. So thank you.
I just want to piggyback on that. I'm glad you said that, because the whole is, what does that look like for someone that has 22 credits? What does the future look like? What does a portrait of a graduate look like that we want for our students? And we're having a tough time visualizing that. That's because we haven't gone through that process yet. And that's what we're also embarking on this year. What do we want for our students as they graduate from our district? What do we want from students that are entering into our community? And that actually is our next presentation. And so that dovetailed very nicely. Good job putting those two together, Diane
Well,
and Willie.
wish I could say it was on purpose.
Director Kleindro.
And looking at this graduation requirement, we're going from 26 down to 22 in a 4 or 5 year span. What happens to our core diplomas? Because we now have that, there is a policy, and we're going less than 22. I mean, where's the core going to fit in? What number goes with them?
And that would be one that we would have to explore. Currently, it's at 17. So does it, but that would remain the same because that is the state requirement. So that wouldn't go any lower. It wouldn't change that requirement.
Okay, so they would stay at 17. Okay, because I thought we're going lower than what they currently have. Yeah, thank you.
Director
And
Beck.
I apologize. And I would point out how we would access the core diploma. There's no conversation in that you're expected, just like we have in this presentation, to take a full load in whatever that schedule, block versus enhance, whatever that looks like. The expectation is you will be scheduled for a full load for your first 3 years, and then from there. So the core diploma really is almost, regardless of where this conversation goes and where the board's direction goes, it's almost a standalone right now.
Yeah. 2 questions. So, how many teachers in the classroom have been involved in the planning so far? Is it trickle down, or is it you guys directly, the main group directly surveying teachers in the classroom?
All teachers were given the opportunity at the beginning of the process for feedback.
Okay.
Teachers that were a part of the committee were a part of that. And then once we said, all right, here's all the work come together, same thing we brought before the board, we took to our teachers again, and then they had another opportunity to provide feedback. And then as these curriculum areas are getting together, they're going to the building and pulling those folks from department chairs.
So on August 20th, it was all teachers at every single high school had input about whether it would be a block, a skinny, or a mini, and they had great discussions and lots of questions that were with all teachers. And then in some cases, it was we need some further conversation around that. So then department heads are coming back together within a certain department to continue that. And then department heads will take any information or questions back to their teachers. So that accordion effect is happening right now.
Okay.
But again, after talking with the specialist today and just getting a general idea, it was very supportive, positive. Teachers appreciated the time. Again, there are difficult decisions that have to be made, but people really coming together.
Okay. Actually, I'm just realizing my other questions are they're related to schedule, but not exactly. So I'll send them in an email because sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, we are at the point now where it's as grassroots level of the people doing the work are the ones giving the feedback. Now, would we say, hey, did everybody come to agreement that this was it? No.
Yeah.
And we will, I don't think we'll ever find anything in our district where that is the case. But now everybody is at a level of whatever problem you identify and you foresee, how are we going to fix it? And we need you to help us do that. So if you have identified the problem, what feedback and guidance can you provide to fix it or work through that? And that's where we're at this point in time.
I only have a couple. You guys took a whole bunch. My first question, and I'm really gonna walk the tightrope with this, but so we've been implementing a ton of things. Um, this is a huge task, and I know we keep talking about supports, but how many supports do we have with all the other things that are getting implemented? I'm trying to think of how to word this the right way, but I mean, we do have a lot of things going on in our district. So how are we going to have enough? I think it's great that we're doing this stuff, but I don't want to do so much that we're breaking the system. This is something that we should look at adopting to, obviously, because we can't do the same stuff. It just doesn't work. We've learned that through everything. But are the supports truly going to be there? Is the time going to be dedicated to that? Because, I mean, there's so many things going on. Your team is only so big, and you have to allocate time for other things. And then, like Director Kleindrom always talks about teacher prep time and all that stuff. You can't tell she's a retired teacher, by the way. But I just want to make sure that all those supports are going to be there, because with so many things going on in a district as large as we are, I don't want anything falling through the cracks. And I don't want to go back. I want to keep going forward and looking through the windshield.
So, and I'll let Diane expand, but I think the ILDs would be in agreement. 3 years ago, 3 years, starting 4 years now. When we came into a district that had prioritized a lot of things around early literacy and around elementary work. I think we were all in agreement that our junior high, middle school, and high schools were kind of left behind as a focus for a number of years. We then changed that focus to middle school last year, and we're supporting that. But that still kind of left our high schools still behind. It doesn't mean there's not things we still need to do at elementary to support, but our high schools have kind of been left out of the mix. We've adjusted and we're focused on a few areas curricularly, but for the most part, our high schools have been begging to become a focused area topic. And I think that's where we're at now. It is the right time to now support our high schools. It doesn't mean there's not other things happening at our high school, but everything that we're doing at the high school leads to supporting this work. And I don't know if, gentlemen, you would add anything more to that, but I think there's an importance that high schools become a priority for us.
I would agree with that, and I would probably allude to one of the slides that was at the very beginning that showed our graduation rate as it currently stands. And we just know that if we keep doing what we're doing, there's a good chance we're going to keep getting what we get, and we have to look at some ways to up our performance there while meeting the other criteria that our stakeholders have all said are important with the schedule. So I think that's been the impetus for the work, and we're just looking for ways to improve our practices.
I would just follow up with that our system is designed to get the results that we are getting. And so with the work that's being done to explore this, again, it's a strategic change in the schedule as one piece to that puzzle. But we also know that, again, getting that focus with the high schools to make a difference is absolutely critical. We have systems in place now to manage and to monitor exactly what you're talking about, so that we don't take so much on that we're drowning. And every year we could say, now's not the year because we have X, Y, and Z. Now's not the year. And I've been in education for over 35 years, and it was that way my first year, and it continues to be that way. And that is the world of education. And so our job is to put it in a place so that we can approach it intentionally, purposefully, with the structures and the systems in place so that we can manage it. And I think that as the board makes the decision in September, this would become a priority then. And so I'm going to share an example. We have a 7-year cycle for adoption. We have some more high school curriculum resources that need to be adopted, believe it or not, because now we're in a routine. We may have to push those back a year. I'm just going to share that as an example because professional development will be really important to focus around how you use your time in the current schedule. What instructional practices need to occur? What engagement needs to happen within that? So we have an incredible team that knows to monitor that, to be able to make decisions so that we're not just loading and loading and loading and not de-implementing or taking something off the plate. This is too important for us to not have that on the radar.
And a quote came to mind as I was thinking about your question. When was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. And I think we're kind of in that same place, that it's never a good time. We're not going to reap the benefit day one of it. But if we want it to happen and begin reaping from it, we've got to do it so we can get to that place.
You teed that up perfect for my next question. What is the target class that you see this fully setting up for success? And what I mean by that is, okay, so we make this change. It's going to affect some of the high school students. They're already on their path. Is it going to be like the first grade class from now? Is it going to be the 8th grade class from now? That with everything that we've been putting in place, what is the target? What are the benchmarks where we're going to see the growth? Obviously, I don't expect it to change overnight, but what is that target? I'm sure you guys have talked about what class are we going to see everything that we've done. Man, this is going to be like the thing. And I realize you probably don't want to put a number on that.
No, but you might find 5 different answers to it. And I'm going to go out on a limb, having led high school reform in a building that went from being identified as a national dropout factory to having the highest graduation rate that we had ever had in the district. And it was the freshman class coming in where they got access to the change. Because if you look at the data, they will say kids who get D's and lower their freshman year are more likely to drop out than they are to graduate. So I would suggest that the year that we implement and have resources to seeing increased freshman success. Now, obviously, everything we do with increasing early literacy and all those other things puts everybody in a better position as they go through. But I would say as we intentionally are making changes and impacting on high school, that the freshman class that benefits from having these additional resources available and intentionality of making sure they pass their classes versus failing their classes, that would be the class that we would see a huge difference in the graduation rate. Because once, and in the particular building I'm talking about, the resources we dumped into that freshman class, in which kids didn't fail in that freshman class, a handful did, but didn't. Our graduation rate only increased with that class as they got closer and closer to graduation because they passed their classes their freshman year. If they passed during their freshman year, it's very difficult for them to drop off along the way, and it's more likely you pick up a handful more as you go. That'd be my answer to it.
Well, President Gosa, if I could, when will we realize all of it? To Diane's point, 30-some years, and there's always the next thing. Now, I go back to my coaching days, and they said, don't stay for that player that's coming up through the youth because there's going to be another one. That said, I think that we will realize a lot of this incrementally. I think about these 8th graders that'll be freshmen next year. I think that will be a phase. I think about the 6th graders right now that will have the middle school concept for 3 years and just how that's going to change that experience. I think about our science of reading, and right now that we're at like 80 and 90% proficient in our kindergarten and first graders, and what it's going to feel like when they get there. So by the time our kindergarten and first graders are graduating, I got to assume we're going to have the next best things on the backs. I can't assume that's going to be the end of it. But I do think we're going to have a phased approach where we're like, oh my gosh, these were the kids that got 3 years of middle school experience. Oh my gosh, these were the kids that have had science of reading since the day they showed up. So I do think we'll have incremental improvements.
Okay. I do have a kid in elementary, junior high, and high school, so I'll see some of that. One of the other things I would like, and you could just this can get emailed to us or whatever, or actually, I'll ask the question first, because far too often we'll get calls and emails. Why wasn't included in this? How do you guys keep attendance? Do you have them sign in that they're there? You know who was there? Because I don't know about my other board members, but I would like a list of all the people that were actually a part of the process. So when someone comes and says, I wasn't there, well, why weren't you there? Were you not there that day? Or, what is the issue of that? So,
I think that Diane has done an awesome job, and one of the slides may have it on the different points of opportunities in which all staff were surveyed or all staff were presented to and all staff were followed up with. So we have that. I think you also on this slide also have a list of all the folks that were kind of the larger group in which, we did everything we could to get back. Even this last time around, when we were narrowing it down on the schedule, we did a face-to-face, and there were a group of people that didn't make it to that, so we did a virtual meeting for them to help, invited them to get that information, and then included them in the next meeting. And so I think we can go through and just say here were all the touch points where people had an opportunity to give us feedback. Ultimately, we know the whole community had opportunities early on when we were exploring. Here's your feed to the survey. We need this input. And I think, as with everything, whether it was on the school closures when we're looking at, folks just don't get as active as we'd like until their thing, whatever their thing is, becomes the conversation. So,
no, I agree with you 100%. People they don't want to get involved till it directly affects them.
Yes, correct.
100%. I do appreciate the fact that you guys did the listening sessions and took all that stuff in with community and then talking with students and things like that and staff members as well. It's a way different realm than when I first got on this board, so I do greatly appreciate that.
And I think that's a testament to you guys as a board, because you've been very intentional in the 3 years that I've been in the district of saying, where did you listen to people? Where did you get information from people? And when we have the conversations, we quite often quote you as we go back to saying, hey, that's a priority. So,
okay. I appreciate you answering the questions. Again, always, it's student success, and that's what we have to focus on, and direct impacts in the classroom. And everything that we've been putting together so far, I realize it's a humongous effort, but I think it'll all pay off later on. Whether it's setting kids up for success for post-secondary or whatever they're going to do. So I think this is an awesome opportunity, especially if it makes it a little bit more flexible for kids to be able to do things. If you figure out how you get kids engaged after they get enough credits so that they can go get a little money in their pocket or something, more power to you. I had one kid that he was ready to get out as soon as he could. He was all about doing those one class a days. And I got another one that just loves it and wants to be there all the time. So I get it. Every kid's different. So, but is there any other questions, information that board members would need before September 9th? I hope you captured everything, and Brenda's probably taking all kinds of notes too. So, nope. Director Klein Jerome.
You've given us the graduation rate, and that's based on 4 years in school. Could you tell us, send it through TJ, whatever, how many are 5-year and graduate? I mean, if they do that one extra year, are we capturing kids, and how many, what percentage, whatever that is?
I am very excited for this year because I have a feeling that our core diploma will have captured, I'm sure, I know that our core diploma captured a number of additional kids in last year's graduation class as well. So, and Director Hayes, happy birthday.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. We're going to take a break before we go on to the portrait of a graduate. All right, we are back. We'll move on to our next item for discussion, subject 10.02, Portrait of a Graduate. Turn it over to Superintendent.
Thank you. With us tonight, we have Miss Andrea Stewart, who is working with us to help lead us through the process of Portrait of a Graduate. And it is exactly that. And I'm not going to take any more thunder because we alluded to it earlier in the presentations about how it fits perfectly for what we're doing now. Miss Stewart has been trying to get our district to do this for about 5 years now, and now's the time. And we firmly believe that we need to set the course of what does it look like for a student that leaves our school district to enter our community. And that's the important work that we're here today. Andrea, thank you so much for being with us tonight and sticking through that other heavy discussion that we just did to lead us through this one. So thank you for being here. And as Diane is putting in double duty tonight, so thank you, Diane, for your work on preparing us for this. I'll turn it over.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and to share a little bit about Portrait of a Graduate and the work that I've led in other states and across Iowa. So I'll talk a little bit about the why first. So as we're entering into the first slide, we're really getting into the idea that our future is unpredictable. A lot of the work that we engage the design team in the beginning is the idea of what do the data say about what our business, industry, and community partners want from the folks that are coming into their systems. You'll see an example here that we share with the design team, and I'll talk a little bit about what that design team is here in a moment. But we draw data from the World Economic Forum to look across all industrialized countries and what is it that across all sectors and what is coming together and rising to the top as the highest needs in terms of what we're hiring for. And we've got a lot of jobs that exist now that won't in 5 and 10 years. We know there's an AI revolution. There's a lot of things that are changing in terms of technology as it accelerates. And so we have to have learners that have adaptability to enter the workforce so that they are able to have skills so that they can upskill and reskill as needed. Some of the data we share throughout the process is the fact that our young learners now are going to change actual careers 15 and 20 times, not just jobs. And so they have to be ready with the types of competencies that you see on this slide. And they come out with this report every year, so we always try to give the most updated report to our design teams. And again, I'll talk about who's on that team in a moment. But really thinking about that range of skills, you can see in this particular example, there are cognitive skills, self-efficacy, technology skills, which of course are changing really rapidly, and then working with others. And these are the kind of things that we talk about valuing. And yet when we ask, do we directly instruct these? Do we provide feedback on them, and do we assess them? The answer is usually no for most kids. And so the shift here is to make sure that we're preparing those learners for that unpredictable future with adaptability. These are just a couple of the portraits that I was a part of facilitating. You can see Tipton on the left and then Clinton Community School District on the right. These are examples of the physical portrait. So when we say portrait, what does that mean? It's a messaging piece, but it's also something that is living and breathing. So Tipton's, you can see on the left, those different shapes are their different competencies. When they went through this whole process, they actually took almost 2 years to do their design process because they were in the middle of COVID. It was really tough to get together and get all the relevant parties at the table, and so they took a little bit longer. Typically, it's about a 9-month process. But you can see those shapes. Those actually became magnets that they would take and they would pull out and put on their whiteboards or wherever else is magnetic, or they would pull them out and put them in Google Classroom as icons when they were focusing on those particular competencies and the skills that make them up. So those were things that were actually active. It isn't just a portrait on the wall. It's something that is actually part of how we do teaching and learning moving forward. And you can see on the right, Clinton Community School Districts, many of their competencies kind of echo ones that are actually required in the Iowa Core. In the Iowa Core, thanks. In the Iowa Core, there have been the universal constructs, which would be collaboration, critical thinking, accountability, and productivity that have been required since the academic core came out. So the Department of Education has valued these adaptive competencies just as long as we have, and now is the time to put them into motion. This is an example of that, just at a little bit smaller grain size. So you saw collaboration up there on the previous examples. Part of the work is designing what we call learning progressions. really getting clear on what done looks like at each of the grade bands so that developmentally we're able to grow those skills over time by building them in a scaffolded way for our students. The value of this is that there's clarity for educators, for students, for parents, for community members, business and industry partners in terms of how we vertically articulate so that the skills build logically and developmentally appropriately. It's also a lot of times districts will actually not have the K2, 3, 5, 6, 8. They'll actually have just a number, level 1, 2, 3, 4. And we look at this as an asset-based approach. When you take away the grade bands from the actual progression, you're able to honor where each learner is versus talking about what they don't have. We spend a lot of time in schools talking about deficits, and this is really an asset-based approach so that we can scaffold that for our learners, because perhaps in one skill, listening to understand for a collaborator, a student is really excelling, as opposed to in one where they're expressing their ideas clearly, they need some more supports. So we're able to differentiate that based on their assets, what they do have, and not have the stigma of a deficit mindset in the Portrait of a Graduate process. So what are those competencies? This is just an example of what they are and what they're not, just to get really clear on a non-example. They're conceptual areas. These are big things like collaboration that transfer no matter what discipline, no matter what grade level. And they're things that are high value for our business community industry partners and for the immersion with community experiences. What they're not are individual skills specific to a certain discipline. So for example, if critical thinking is one of the competencies, we don't default to say, well, that's only in math and science. We also do critical thinking in ELA and in all of our courses, social studies, in our CTE, everywhere. So making sure that that's cross-disciplinary. They are future ready. What students need to be what we call choice ready. We want to empower them to make choices in their futures that are really empowering for them. It is not now focused. In other words, what they need to be successful today or just to get through the school system. We talk over and over about what they need beyond the walls of school in addition to what they need in it. They are a large grain size. You saw on the previous slide, you've got collaboration, but then you have I can statements. So you have something that is actually actionable. What learners do within a classroom and what they know. So you've got that sort of embedded piece. It's not a very small grain size where there isn't room for learner agency. In the previous presentation, we were talking about engaging learners differently so that they're engaged deeply in school and want to take those additional experiences. That's what this does, is builds the agency of the learner, their ability to own those outcomes, co-design what it looks like to demonstrate some of those competencies, and be able to really find purpose for that in their lives. We even talk about giving them additional currency. When I'm able to take and spend skills that I have somewhere else and it gives you value, that's an additional currency that an academic experience alone does not provide. They are meant to be demonstrated many times in many contexts. So we don't say in 9th grade, you finished collaboration, you're done, you don't have to collaborate again. It's over and over, and it can be in multiple contexts, and we can actually value the things they do beyond the walls of school. They could bring in examples of, in collaboration, maybe I was leading something in my youth group, and I'm able to bring a video in of me doing that, and I can validate that with the classroom as well. So they can really take those community immersive experiences and have those validated and valued. And then finally, they are able to be developed over time in a vertical articulation, like I mentioned before. They're not specific to a handful of grade levels. In fact, we've had conversations in the early process about how we might call it a portrait of a learner, so that that is really clear to people. Sometimes portrait of a graduate feels like a high school thing, even though it's not. It's about the journey of that learner, developing that profile so that when they leave the school experience, they have those skills and competencies with them. So again, across the whole grade level. Several alignment pieces. It's not meant to be one more initiative. I know it feels like one more thing, and we just said in the previous presentation that we're doing a lot of things. This is actually one that a lot of districts use to pull their other initiatives together to one sort of North Star. You can see here some examples would be multi-tiered systems of support. How do we help them learn how to be co-owners of that MTSS process? It's through these portrait competencies, because they're developing those non-cognitives that make them better advocates for themselves, better collaborators, better planners, better management of their time. It supports college and career readiness efforts as they enter the workforce. This, again, just like the last one when we talked about the capstone, it helps them build portfolios that are valuable to relevant parties. It helps with positive behavior supports because it's really all about growing the affective side of the learner as opposed to just the academic side, and then having that be paired together. And then developing rigorous, meaningful learning experiences. If you have competencies that are really explaining what critical thinking is at a fine grain size, we now have to make sure our learning experiences are getting at that critical thinking versus hoping that we'll get there. So some of the design may shift a little bit to make sure that we're all reaching all of those competencies over the course of their experience. The one that I really want to highlight is the increasing of the community partnerships. This is what I think is one of the most unique school improvement efforts across the country right now, in that it's all hands on deck. A lot of this is about building additional bridges to our community, business, and industry partners so that we have more experiences for learners beyond the walls of school and more experiences with them coming in along the continuum of work-based learning experiences, career-connected learning experiences, so that really we can make the walls a little more seamless and our learners have that opportunity to give back more to their community, just as we spoke about in the previous presentation. What this is really is think of it kind of like an umbrella. If in an umbrella you have the canopy, the fabric of an umbrella, and that would be the portrait of a graduate, and then the ribs within that would be the other initiatives that are giving that strength and rigor. And students are able to carry that umbrella and use it where it's most valuable. If it's not raining, I don't need the umbrella. If it is, I need it up, or if it's sunny. And so it's something that is transferable and makes all of their school experiences kind of come together in one piece that they can use where and when they need it. And it helps our surrounding community and business support what we're doing because we're giving them a purpose to get involved. And we're also able to show them learners that are growing in those capacities that they're asking for. Every listening session we did with business, community, and industry partners, they were asking for these attributes. They even say there are times we can teach them some of the content. We can teach them the math they need for this job. What we can't teach them is collaboration and critical thinking that we needed them to have, growing that all along the way. So they want more of this. That's what our business, community, and industry partners are telling us. And they're a part of this process. And then ultimately, that's going to allow us to reflect on both current and future practices, making sure that there's alignment in all of that work with the goal that we have a profile of a successful, productive citizen so that we know that we're guaranteeing that they have that adaptability as they leave the system.
I just want to share a little bit of the timeline. So the DSAT team last spring semester, starting even as early as January, started to engage in the portrait of a graduate because we knew that our goals for our Growing Excellence Plan and that strategic approach will be coming up for this school year. So we wanted to engage in something where we pull the community in, we have all stakeholders, and the portrait of a graduate just seemed to be a really good match for that. So DSAT did all of the learning and then helped decide that, yes, this is actually what is going to bring synergy and cohesiveness to our system. So that's where DSAT was. During our SAI leadership launch in August, where we had I think it was about 52, 53 administrators come together for a day to really engage in the preparation for this school year. We did take everyone through some learning about the portrait of a graduate too. And during that time, after our learning, we did ask for some feedback and what do they agree with and what do they aspire with. And I just want to read a couple comments that were shared in summary of the information we gathered during that session. That this framework not only guides us, but also reinforces our collective responsibility to ensure every student reaches their fullest potential equipped with skills that transcend the classroom. So think about how powerful that is, and that's our leaders coming together saying this is what this can do for us. They aspire to deepen the engagement with the community and enhance transparency with all stakeholders. So again, the portrait is an avenue to be able to do all of that work and bring that synergy and cohesiveness to our system.
So to those partnerships and the idea of the administrator's aspiration to be more connected with community, that's what this does from the design all the way through the process. So I mentioned design team earlier. Design team is something that is comprised of, we have all relevant parties from the system. So you can see up there, students, school district personnel, so teachers, administrators, counselors, there's a range of school district participants, parents, caregivers, business industry representatives, social service agency partners, representatives from faith organizations, making sure that there's all the voices from the community there. It's a challenge. A district of this size, of course, has many, many relevant parties that would potentially want to be a part of this work. So we began brainstorming with DSAT last year on who might that be, and that work will be finished yet this fall. The goal being that we're representing the student population of Davenport in the selection of that group. And I'll talk in a minute about how we get other voices at the table, because you can't possibly have everybody in this room that might want to participate, but we have a way to do that as well. But the idea here is that the actual portrait itself is co-designed and co-owned by those individuals. And not just during the design process, we bring them back afterwards in year 2 and year 3 to, again, build those bridges between school and community so that we can increase the number of experiences our learners are having beyond the walls of school and from the folks outside of the walls of school in. And this is valuable to communities because then they become partners in helping to ensure that the learners that are leaving the system and coming to work for them or volunteer for them are really ready for contributing to economic growth, civic responsibility, and community sustainability. So that they're co-creating the outcomes that they want and the human beings that they would like to come into their organizations. This is just an example in the very beginning, and that's where we are now, is to bring those relevant parties together and make sure we solidify that timeline. And there's a couple of different teams. Again, I mentioned the relevant parties already, but you can see it's a huge range. It's not just a school effort. This is something that transcends the school. So the core team, this is a leadership team that comes together and meets regularly to make sure that we're planning, monitoring, we're deciding who is participating when, ensuring all voices are involved, creating agendas, managing communication. We have a whole communication plan that is beginning to be laid out now, and managing what I'll show you in a moment. I have a slide around feed forward and feedback. For us, feed forward is information that comes in before decisions have been made, so it can be at the table for the decision making and the drafting. Feedback is after there's a draft of a portrait, getting feedback on what has been created. So we ensure both are present so that educator voice and other relevant party voices are in the design process, not just after the design process. And we engage in any problem solving on the core team and celebrate progress throughout. The design team has all of those relevant parties that I mentioned before. This is a team that meets once a month once we get started. And this would be where they're actually going to be looking at those data I mentioned earlier, such as from the World Economic Forum and what's going on out there in the world of work and what are we needing in terms of jobs and skills. And they're going to learn about potential competency frameworks that are out across the country and around the world. They will help us solicit feedback from community, business, and industry connections that they have, so their circles of influence will be able to share their thinking into feed forward that comes to the design team. And then they'll help us analyze data from those feedback loops and actually propose that draft set of competencies to get additional feedback on toward the end of the year and help finalize that and the actual visual that I gave you examples of earlier. So what are focus groups? This is, again, as I mentioned before, you can't get all the humans in the room on the design team. It's just too many folks in the room. You can't get every voice in the room at the table. So it has to be small enough that every person can be heard. So we use focus groups to get additional feed forward and feedback. And so this might be student, parent, community, business, industry groups. We might have a specific topic that we're asking them about, or we might have a more general bend as well in terms of when we bring them together. But those are going to be again, representing the student population. So we'll be very intentional about making sure that there's representation and equity of voice in those focus groups as well. This is the timeline as it stands right now. You can see that we're in August, so we're giving that initial board presentation, and the admin work group and the core team is coming together next week, actually, to have our first meeting, and then we'll be working with DSAT as well on a rotating basis to be on that list as well. So moving into making sure we're having learning for those teams so that they're building their capacity before we bring on the design team in November or December, probably somewhere in there. We'll make those final decisions as a core team, and then that will become a monthly meeting. And between those meetings, the core team and the DSAT will continue to meet throughout the flow. By January, we're prioritizing those competencies and creating the portrait with feed forward again from relevant parties and then feedback loops that give feedback on what's been drafted. and then expecting a board adoption, a recommendation to the board around May, and beginning the strategic planning process. We actually begin that strategic planning with the core team and the DSAT throughout the year, but we lean more heavily into it once the portrait is closer to completion in the spring, and then spend the summer really making sure that that's tied down. This is just an example of those feedback loops. So if we start with staff and we engage them in dialogue about what deeper learning is, and thinking about portrait of a graduate, portrait of a learner, helping them understand what this is, and then they are able to give their ideas about priority competencies to the portrait of a graduate design team, portrait of a learner design team, and they'll reflect on those recommendations and they include them in the process. We actually have protocols where they have to actually name where the competencies came from. So they say, this was a teacher recommendation, this was a parent recommendation, this was a community member. We have symbols and the whole thing. So we make sure we track that all the way through, because there's nothing worse than filling out a survey or participating in a focus group and you think your ideas just went off to the side and weren't used. So we really make sure that we label all of those things so we can provide that back to those relevant parties so they know how their ideas were used. And then it would go then back and share that back with the staff, what was created from there, and so on. And that happens 2 full cycles at least during the year. Just some questions that that you might have now. I don't know if we would want to answer them now or at the end, but some things that people wonder in this phase is what you wonder about who is involved at various points and when those things are happening, or what are we getting excited about with regard to the who and when. And this piece, I'll just kind of, basically this is a decision that's not yet made. So this is a slide to talk about how we use data decision-driven making in this process, but we need to have the core team and the DSAT together to have that conversation about which data do we want to use. Obviously, it's the data that is on your data wall, but really thinking about also local, national, international data that will drive that. So all 3 of those, making decisions based on that. What do we already have that we want to use and leverage, and what data might we need to collect? What we might be missing some data that would help us make informed decisions. And so between the core team and the DSAT on the way to the design team, we'll make that decision. So this decision has not yet been made about which data. Different districts pull different data, certainly in keeping with your priorities that you already have. So again, I'll kind of just swing back to those questions a minute ago. What questions you have about who and when, what questions you have about the portrait of a learner process in general, or what are you most excited about?
Director Klein-Jerome.
My first question is, are the neighboring districts doing this?
We have multiple in the area that are doing this. Clinton is one of them.
No, I mean Bettendorf, PV, North Scott. I want that neighboring because that's what we seem to be comparing other things we're doing to. So that close by.
PV does have something that they're I don't know if they're labeling it as a portrait of a graduate yet. They have a mix of the universal constructs and some additional skills that they're putting together to be something like this. I don't know if they're going to name it this, but that's what it is. They're raising some competencies to the forefront. Bettendorf made one, but they made one right before COVID, and that was also, there was a lot of leadership changeover at that time. I don't know the status of where that is now, but they do have a portrait that was made just before COVID. North Scott does not have one that I know of.
Why is this not under LZAC? Because that is a community group, and you're asking the community. It seems like it should be tied together.
It very well should be and could be, and is something that we have discussed. We wanted to finish the priority topics that the board had assigned to LZAC before, but very well could be an excellent spot for it.
You say this is not one more initiative, so I'm a teacher in a classroom. How does this affect me at all?
Sure. So I was just with another district today before I came here, and we were working on, they had lesson plans that they were preparing, and they were looking through them. They're working on communication. That's their competency right now that district or that building is working on. And so we had several ICANN statements, and they were putting peer-to-peer interactions within their lesson plan that had those ICANN statements for communication explicitly built in. So they were already doing a math lesson in this case. And they were already having learners kind of get together and talk occasionally, but not with the intention of building some specific ICANNs that would be in that vertical articulation. So the difference is that it's intentional planning of those competencies in a daily basis and things that make logical sense, not that you'd have a separate kind of, okay, on Fridays we're going to do our portrait of a learner competencies. They're embedded within the lesson planning in ways that are authentic and valuable to move the learning.
So though it is more. If you're saying I have to do this lesson plan, you are creating more for a teacher, correct?
So the example I gave, though, they were already doing a lesson where kids were working together. They just they put the ICANN statements in that made sense, so that the learners were explicitly working on an ICANN statement that built in a vertical way, as opposed to everybody making up their own idea of what communication was. So it was already happening, so it's not more. It's just shifting the ICANNs so that there's consistency as you move through the system, so that we can track that growth of that particular skill. So that, again, the small groups are already happening. It's just a matter of kind of tweaking, I think, more than adding.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Director Beck.
I guess to piggyback off of that, I like the idea of Portrait of a Learner more so than Portrait of a Graduate. It sounds less of the end. And I like the idea that this is supposed to pull all of our initiatives together, but it does feel like it's kind of one more thing. And I wonder if maybe starting at the community level with LZAC or some of those other groups might not be helpful. I realize that they aren't necessarily the people who know the competencies the best, but we're already doing all these other things. Maybe coming at people with we're going to put it all under this one roof could sound overwhelming, even though it might not be, if that makes sense. I understand you're already doing it. It's just a matter of intentionalizing it. And I get it. It still takes some bandwidth to deal with. And, if we're already making all these other changes, I worry that we'll be adding yet another thing. And so maybe going from the outside in might be a different way to approach it, so that we're not overloading people with one more thing. I don't know, just my thought. But I do like the idea, and I like the idea of a learner rather than a graduate.
I think that that idea of, are we overloading teachers? And as Andrea was describing that feed forward, it's really getting information to help build it. Is one way to look at that, and it really does bring that cohesion to the system that we're looking at for a pre-K-12 approach. And there is ways. I do believe there are ways to balance it so it doesn't feel like an overload for teachers. Absolutely.
And it does, the competencies end up coming from what the teachers say they need their kids to have, if that makes sense too. So they're saying, this is what we need our learners to have. They don't really have these competencies. We need these to be worked on. So that they ask for that in the teacher feed forward. That's how we structure that feed forward session, is what skills and competencies do you want your learners to have? And we're going to help you get there. So it's an ask on their end. And we track the numbers and all the things, so we're able to show that.
Director Barnes.
I like the ambition of this a lot, and I'm actually comfortable with the whole idea of Portrait of a Graduate, because I think that this is something that could potentially be a way to attract families and students to this district. But I am curious how you work with a community to be forward thinking. That would be my concern, because I think that oftentimes when we involve the community, or even when we have focus groups and discussions, we get focused in on the now and the near, but not the far. And this really needs to be about the far. And I'm going to be direct. One of the greatest challenges when we want to talk about the economy and good jobs is non-consumption of higher education. It's a national crisis. And I think that oftentimes when we talk about this, we talk about the immediate need of jobs that need to be filled today. And a portrait of a graduate is not about the jobs of today. So how do you do that especially when you engage employers who are looking at jobs they can't fill today, that oftentimes maybe don't emphasize that need for post high school education and consumption of higher ed?
Yeah, I mean, great question. We do it in several ways. So we bring some things in, actually some futurist kind of videos and some futurist data to the design team process, which involves our business community and industry partners. With other districts, I've also held business community industry partner nights, and we have watched films, we have engaged, we have had panels. I mean, there's lots of ways that we can do this and tailor it to Davenport. But you have to your point, give them examples and advocates for years that 5 and 10 years down the road. What do we need? 20 years, like kind of a futurist look, which makes some people nervous because they are, like you said, focused on now, but it's the long game. And making sure our learners are empowered for the long game with adaptability that allows them to survive with these various skills. How do we make sure that we're continually addressing that? You have to have the conversations and sort of the antagonist that allows them to kind of have that critical conversation. And we do that, like I said, through film, panels, structured protocols, data, but really open to any kind of ideas that would help make that even more powerful. And more than one night like that, not just one.
Director Hayes.
A quick question. Can you give us an idea of what type of costs we're looking at for this?
For the development process itself,
The entire program, basically, and I know you can't give me an actual, but a base point where we would be starting at.
we have a contract with Learning Couture with Andrea to be able to do that. And that contract provides just the facilitation and those pieces of it. Teacher time, we wouldn't be looking at adding any teacher time or doing evening meetings with teachers. Certainly invite people in, but the base costs and then production, creating the actual portrait itself, so graphic design and all of that. We do have a communications with graphic design, so we could potentially keep all that internal. Advertising, communicating it, we would keep that internal because we have our communication team. So a dollar amount. I think that for the printing and advertising, I'm not sure what that would be. I would have to take a look at that. For the contract itself, we're looking at about $25,000
Okay, thanks.
over time.
Any other discussion? You got anything? Director Posture?
Yeah, I support this. I think it's great. I guess one question I would have is this: you're talking about elected officials and business people getting involved, but I think one area we definitely have to address is with the city of Davenport, as far as they need to get behind this also too, and not just our local businesses. But yeah, I think this will be great.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think like we got the local elected officials, so that way they advocate for our kiddos as well. I mean, we got legislators and all that good stuff. The more people that advocate for this stuff is a lot better. I think this is awesome. It kind of ties into everything we've been doing and everything like that, and I consider this an investment. We're investing in our kids and our students, right? I see it every day. I coach youth sports with one of the kindergarten teachers, or not kindergarten, elementary teachers, gym teacher. And just the way that he coaches and stuff with kids, it's the stuff that they're doing in the classroom every day. It's so crazy. The kids track, pay attention. It's really easy to get them back on task and stuff. So I think if you can weave this stuff in, most people are already doing it. They just don't realize they're doing it. And then when you get to that aha moment, like, oh yeah, we've been doing this is how we're doing it, it just makes it easier for everybody to work, that way. So the students are getting the same thing. Um, and I think it's awesome that it goes to pre-K all the way to 12. I think you're going to get a lot more buy-in at the elementary level because those kids are like sponges, just taking everything in. And like when my son as soon as tomorrow morning when I take him to school, he's going to tell me about everything he did. They just take all that, and some of the stuff you're just like, wow, I didn't even think that second grade you'd know that. But it's so awesome to see that, and then it also helps people wrap around that, right? Because they want to be a part of that. You want to see a kid be successful and things like that. So I think that's a huge draw to getting the buy-in from folks. But not only that, like it's again in the elementary and maybe the junior high when they start, seeing those little things on the wall and stuff like that. That's cool. They want to, be a part of that. High school probably not so much. But if you get them and you track them along, eventually you're going to get that buy-in all the way up into the high school and stuff like that. So, um, I I think it's awesome. I think this is going to help out with a lot of the stuff, and I'm glad all the pieces are kind of falling together with the different things we're implementing. And I liked some of the photos you were showing there with the different schools. I look at ours like a puzzle, right? Because we're doing all these things in elementary, junior high, and high school, and all these things, and they just come together, and then that's your portrait of your graduate. All these different things that have came together, and then boom, that's what you see. So it's
Well,
a
I
cool
think about
little
the
idea for graduates, seniors, little puzzle pieces coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. I really see the power in the common language. So, the common language, not only for students, but our staff members, for our community members, our parents, business, to know that this is what we're all striving towards, to be able to reach that North Star that TJ so it talks about with the graduation rate. And it really is preparing all students. And so, not only the common language, the common knowledge and understanding, but ways that we can actually track and monitor to see where students are progressing. I just make automatic connections to the Character Strong curriculum that's being taught, and that teachers we're hearing great positive feedback from. I think about the rigorous curriculum that we have in place right now and how that's going to take it to a whole nother level. And now, as a student, oh, I see my roadmap. This is what I need to be able to do. So then we have equity for every single student that walks across that graduation stage. I just couldn't be more excited for that vision.
And along those lines, I want to say it's very infectious, right? Like you might have a rough day and you come home and then your kid's telling you, and then you get engaged, right? Because your kid's the one pulling you in, and I think that's so awesome. We get it at baseball practice. That all of a sudden they want to talk about what they did or football or whatever. But then they're not only that, then they're engaging the shyer kids that might not have participated as much, and it's a very infectious thing. So I think this is awesome. I'm glad we're doing this. Why we've never done this is crazy, but again, with putting everything in place, I think this is a great thing. So
It's all about the timing. And I'm telling you, 5 years ago, yes, it seemed like the right time, but it wasn't. It was not. But today is the right time for sure.
you really knocked this one out of the park. There wasn't a lot of questions. Good job. Thank you very, very much. This is, again, awesome stuff here. So thank you. All right, we will move on to subject 10.03, policies for discussion. I will turn it over to Vice President Klein-Jerome.
We have only two policies up for discussion: chronic absenteeism and truancy, and student promotion, retention, acceleration. Were there any questions about the two? Okay, thank you. Director Poston.
On the chronic absenteeism, there's nothing really mentioned as far as the parents' responsibility that I see in there.
So all of that stuff falls under the administrative regulation component of it. So that notion of when you hit the mark, it's turned over to the county attorney, and from there the heavy accountability comes in. That's what's actually in the law. What we're passing today is what IASB recommends as the formal policy.
But so that additional information does not need to be in here.
It's in our administrative regulations.
Okay.
And Courtney has been leading a task team on how we integrate that into our current practices to where it's not overloading what we're currently doing. So.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll come back later for a vote.
Thank you. We will move on to administrative reports.
Not at this time.
Board requests. Any board requests? All right, I got one. Name of board member Gosa. Date of request 8/26/2024. Item requested, an agenda item. Description of request. I would like the district athletic director to do a presentation on athletic programs and how we are going to grow them. What checks and balances will be in place to ensure our ADs are actively helping improve and grow programs.
Second. Oh, I thought you were done.
Why are you making this request? Due to low numbers with participation in athletic programs, this is an immediate need. When would you like this? As soon as possible, and thank you. All right, board reflections. Start with Director Beck.
Well, I really enjoyed our in-depth discussion on potential high school scheduling changes, but I did want to say our most recent, the discussion or the explanation, presentation of Portrait of a Graduate was a really thorough and really well explained presentation. And so I don't have questions. Like, I didn't have a lot of questions. I thought it was just really well explained. This is why we would do this, using terms like umbrella. And then I was like, oh, I kind of get it. So, so I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you, Director Beck. Director Posh.
Well, I feel the same way as Director Beck, and I would just like to, again, thank staff for all their efforts in both the high school schedule and then the presentation on, Portrait of a Graduate. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Poston. Birthday girl, you're up.
That would be a ditto.
Thank you, birthday girl. Director Barnes.
I think we went a board meeting without talking about a single capital project, which was actually kind of a relief given how much time we've spent on that recently. I really enjoyed the presentation on Portrait of a Graduate, and I love the potential of that being the connective tissue of what connects a pre-K through 12 student in this district. And I will echo President Gosa's comments that I think that much of this raw material already exists, and it's just simply connecting those dots for everybody who's doing and laboring and toiling on a daily basis to present to the world what we need to present to the world in order to attract more students to this district. So thanks.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Vice President Klein Jerome.
I thought it was a good discussion, especially about the high school scheduling, and I'm happy that we passed 22 policies tonight.
Thank you, Vice President Klein Jerome. Superintendent Schneckloff.
I think the conversation, or the two conversations dovetailing together about Portrait of a Graduate and the high school schedule really allows the future to be set for where are we going, and I'm really excited about it. I'm also very proud of the process that our team is following to ensure that we have all the voices at the table.
Thank you, Superintendent. I will echo what everyone said. I think I want to say, and I said this at our workshop, what we're doing is legacy work. I get asked all the time by other board presidents and board members how we do the things we do. And we're able to do that because of these awesome conversations and all of your dedication to this district and students in this district. So I want you to know how much I appreciate that. Other boards do watch our board meetings and things like that, and I do get asked those questions all the time. But the things that we're doing today are going to directly impact kids later on. So, and being a parent of a second grader, I greatly appreciate that because I'll get to see that stuff play out. So again, thank you all very much. And I don't know what I'm going to do. Director Potts isn't here to ask for a motion to adjourn. Director Poston, you got a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Motion's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.